poor widow was hired just to clean the barn, until the rancher found his twins sleeping in her arms. Wyoming Territory, late autumn, 1887. The night was deep and still, the wind humming softly through the cracked slats of the Thorne Ranch barn. Jack Thorne, lantern in hand, stepped inside, expecting to find nothing more than the usual creaking wood and the steady breath of horses. But what he saw made him stop cold. There, nestled in a bed of hay, sat Clara, the quiet widow he'd hired to muck stalls. Her back rested against a post, her arms wrapped protectively around two small sleeping forms. Elsie and Emmett, his twin children, were curled into her, their tiny hands fisted in the folds of her worn dress. She was singing, his what a viller. It was barely audible, a trembling lullaby soaked in grief and comfort. Her eyes were closed, face pale in the lamplight, lips moving with reverence. Jack didn't speak, he didn't move. Something inside his chest, long frozen and forgotten, gave a single, aching crack. 2 weeks earlier. The wind was sharp as Clara stepped down from the stagecoach, her boots kicking up dry dust. She carried one canvas bag and nothing more. Her dress was faded, her hands red with the rawness of work, her face hollowed by too many nights without peace. The Thorne Ranch stretched wide behind the gate, a sturdy silhouette against the endless plains. Jack Thorne stood beside the post, arms crossed, black hat shadowing his eyes. "You lost?" he asked. "No, sir," Clara replied. Her voice was low, cautious, but steady. "I heard you needed help in the barn. I can clean, I work hard." He looked her over, gaunt, alone, unthreatening. "We need someone quiet, barn only, no nonsense. I do not speak unless spoken to." He gave a single nod. "Barn's out back, you sleep in the loft, feed yourself. And you do not go near the house. Understood?" "Yes, sir." She turned without another word and walked toward the barn, the wind tugging at her shawl like fingers from the past. The days blurred. Clara worked before dawn and long after sunset. She scrubbed, shoveled, swept, and fed. She spoke to no one unless necessary. The horses grew calm in her presence. Her hands bled quietly, and no one noticed. Except Jack. He passed her now and then, once under the burning sun, when she knelt beside a trough with sweat soaking the back of her dress. "Here," he said, handing her a rag and a tin of water. She looked up, surprised. "Thank you." He gave a brief nod and walked away, but her eyes lingered, puzzled by the flicker of something, kindness, beneath his silence. Mara, the ranch's former housemaid, watched Clara with a curled lip. "She thinks silence makes her holy," she muttered to Harris, the foreman. Harris chuckled. "She's just waitin' to get close to the boss or them kids, mark my words." Clara heard. She said nothing, just kept scrubbing the stall floor until her knees ached. One evening Jack paused near the barn, hearing a soft hum. Peeking through the open door, he saw Clara brushing a mare, her voice carrying a lullaby, not pretty but full of ache. "Horses seem to like you," he said as she turned. "Maybe they know I have nothing to take from them," she replied. He walked away again, but slower. Then the rumors began. Jack sat at his desk when Harris knocked. "Boss," he said, "folks are saying the widow's always hanging around the kid's stall, trying to cozy up too close." Jack's jaw tensed. He didn't answer immediately. "She's keepin' quiet, but that don't mean she's clean." When Harris left, Jack sat still, staring out the window. The nursery stall was kept separate for a reason. He'd drawn that line clearly. And yet, in the quiet of his mind, Jack saw again the curve of Clara's back in the hay, the twins asleep in her arms, her voice humming a tune no one had taught her. His hands clenched, but not from anger. He didn't want to believe the whispers, but more than that, he didn't want to admit how much she had already softened the silence in his home. Late one night, Thorne Ranch lay in silence. A lantern flickered in the hallway of the main house, casting long shadows on wooden floors. From the nursery, a familiar sound pierced the quiet, sharp, high-pitched, and aching. Elsie was crying. Moments later, Emmett joined her in a heartbreaking chorus. Their voices rose like sirens in the dark, echoing down the hallway, through the walls, and out toward the barns. Jack Thorne rubbed his eyes and sat up from the couch where he had dozed off, boots still on. He ran a hand through his hair, already exhausted from days of sleepless nights. He pushed the nursery door open. The children were red-faced, fists clenched, sobs racking their tiny bodies. The nursemaid had left weeks ago. He had refused a replacement. He was their father. It was his burden to carry. But they did not stop. He tried holding Elsie. She screamed louder. He laid her down and picked up Emmett. The boy arched his back, writhing in his arms. Jack sighed, defeated. He sat beside the crib, burying his face in his hands. "What do you want from me?" he whispered to the dark. From the barn loft, Clara lay awake. She heard the cries, not for the first time. She had told herself not to interfere. It was not her place. The terms were clear. But something in those cries struck deeper tonight, rawer, sharper. She stood, pulled her shawl tight, and stepped out into the night air. Inside the house, Jack paced the room, cradling Emmett again, murmuring promises he could not keep. The child wailed harder. A creak from the hall made Jack turn sharply. Clara stood there, barefoot, holding a small cup in trembling hands. I can try," she said softly. Jack stared at her. "You're not allowed. Promotion as wide. And a script, intelligent." "I know," she interrupted, not with defiance, but with urgency. "But I know this kind of cry." She walked slowly into the room, setting the cup on the table. "Just warm water with a little sugar. Not too much." He didn't answer, only stepped aside. Clara lifted Elsie gently, rocking her with a rhythm that came from some buried instinct. She dipped her finger into the warm mixture, touched it to the baby's lips. The child paused, startled, then sipped greedily. Clara smiled, soft and sorrowful. "She's hungry, but not for milk, for comfort." Jack watched in silence. Emmett's cries grew softer as Clara hummed an old folk melody, broken in voice but steady in heart. She didn't notice, when Jack sat down in the corner of the room, didn't notice his eyes fixed not on the twins, but on her. Her face wasn't beautiful. It was tired, etched by pain. But her hands were steady, her presence, anchored, unshakable. The babies quieted, their breathing evening out. The room felt different, warmer. After a moment, Clara returned Elsie to her crib, then Emmett. She turned to leave. "Wait," Jack said, barely above a whisper. She froze. "I saw you, a few nights ago, singing to the horses." She lowered her gaze. "They cry a lot," she said. "So do mine," he replied. She nodded. "I lost one once, a baby. He didn't make it to sunrise." A silence fell between them, heavier than anything either had said. Jack finally spoke. "Why do this? You work yourself raw all day. No one would have known if you stayed in bed tonight." Clara looked up. Her eyes shimmered with something old and tender. "Because someone should have come for mine." Jack swallowed hard. And for the first time since his wife died, he saw not just a laborer, not just a stranger. He saw a mother. Rain tapped against the tin roof, steady and mournful. Jack lay restless in his bed, the fire in the hearth long dead, shadows crawling across the walls. He hadn't seen the twins all evening. Mara had muttered something about Clara taking them out of the house for some air. That had struck him wrong. He got up, pulled on his coat, and lit a lantern. Outside, the storm was gentle but steady, the wind cold as it curled beneath his collar. As he crossed the yard, a faint flicker of light caught his eye. It was coming from the barn. He stepped quietly through the open door. Clara sat on a bed of hay, her back to the entrance. One twin cradled in each arm, their small heads resting on her shoulders. Her voice wavered in the air, a lullaby not meant to be heard, raw and nearly broken. Jack stood frozen. She didn't see him. Her body rocked gently, her arms curled around the children as if shielding them from the ghosts of the world. Tears ran freely down her cheeks, though she didn't wipe them away. She was singing through them. Something in Jack's chest pulled tight. Clara turned slightly, just enough to sense his presence. She froze when she saw him. "I'm sorry," she whispered, clutching the children closer. "I didn't mean to overstep." They were crying again. "I didn't want to wake you." He didn't answer. "I'll go," she said quickly, trying to rise. Her voice broke. "I didn't want trouble. I couldn't bear to hear them cry like that." Jack stepped forward slowly, his voice rough but calm. "You're not in trouble." She stared at him, unsure. "I thought maybe you'd fire me," she said. "Why would I do that?" Her lips trembled. "Because I touched what wasn't mine." He glanced at the twins. Elsie sighed in her sleep, one hand clutching Clara's dress. "They don't seem to mind," he said softly. Clara looked down at the children, then up again. Her eyes were red, but not just from the tears, from memory. "There was a baby," she whispered. "My baby. He came too early. I felt him kick the day before. Then he was gone." Jack's breath caught. "I buried him myself," she continued, voice hollow. "A storm like this one. Just me, a shovel, and a name I never got to say out loud." He lowered his gaze. "I can't have more," Clara said. "Doctor said my body wasn't made for it. Something broke inside me that day." The barn creaked around them, the storm speaking through the wood. "I try to ignore it, the ache. Most days I can." She looked down at the children again. "But when I hear them cry, it's like I hear him too, alone, needing someone. I can't turn away." Jack sat down on a nearby crate, setting the lantern beside him. The light painted his face in soft gold. He watched her, not with pity, but with recognition. "My wife died giving birth to them," he said after a long silence. "I didn't know what to do with the grief, so I built walls and called it strength." Clara nodded slowly. "We're both haunted then." "Maybe," he murmured. "Or maybe we're just tired of being empty." She said nothing. He looked at her again, not at her worn shawl or tired hands, but the way she held the children, like they were the only warmth she had left in the world. "They sleep better with you," he admitted. Clara exhaled, barely audible. "I don't know why, I just hold them." He stood. "I do not need another worker," he said quietly. "But maybe we both need something else." Her brow furrowed. "What are you saying?" Jack looked at the twins, then back at her. "I'm saying don't leave when the storm ends." For the first time she let herself smile, not wide, not brave, but real. The kitchen of the main house had not known warmth in months. The hearth had gone cold since the funeral, and Jack Thorne had stopped sitting at his own table. But that night he lit the fire and cooked, clumsily, awkwardly, but with purpose. Clara sat quietly on the edge of a wooden chair, unsure of what to do with her hands. "You didn't have to go through all this," she said. Jack shrugged, setting down a pot of stew. "I figured it was time someone did." They ate mostly in silence, the fire snapping gently beside them. Clara's shoulders slowly relaxed. Jack poured 2 mugs of coffee, set them between them on the table, and then sat back. "My wife's name was Ruth," he said finally. "She was strong, loud, braver than me, I think." Clara listened, her hands wrapped around the mug. "She died the night they were born, bleeding, no doctor in time. I buried her on the hill under the oak." "I buried mine alone too," Clara said quietly. "No name carved, no one to say prayers. It was raining." Jack nodded, eyes distant. "The midwife told me it was a boy. He never cried." They both sat still for a moment, as if afraid even breath might break the fragile peace. "I've been empty since," Clara whispered, "like the world stopped when he did." "So did I," Jack replied. She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, he didn't look like a rancher hardened by loss. He looked like a man who had forgotten how to be held. The space between them filled with something unspoken. Not love, not yet. But the match had been struck. Outside, shadows moved beneath the eaves. "She spends too much time with them kids," Harris said, voice low. That's not just kindness, that's history. She was pregnant once. Might be those twins are hers, Mara added, arms crossed. Maybe she gave 'em up and came back to take 'em. It ain't right, Harris muttered. People are talking. By morning, whispers had turned to full-blown rumor. Clara felt it before she heard it. How hands stopped working when she passed. How eyes lingered too long. She went about her chores anyway, but when she brought water to the house, she found Jack waiting on the front porch, arms folded. I heard it, he said. She lowered her eyes. It doesn't matter. Let them say what they want. It matters to me. That afternoon, Jack rang the iron bell, once used only in emergencies or gatherings of great importance. The staff gathered near the barn, wary. Jack stood before them, hands steady, eyes hard. There's talk going round, he said, about Clara, about the children, about things that don't belong in mouths, that ain't earned the right to speak them. Mara shifted nervously. Harris looked away. Jack raised his voice. She didn't birth those twins. I did, with Ruth. But she's the one who got them to sleep when I couldn't. She's the one who stood between them and the cold when storms hit. She's the reason they're alive and well. He stepped forward. And anyone who questions her place here questions mine. You answer to me if you come after her again. Silence. Then Clara stepped up beside him, eyes forward, back straight. She said nothing. But for the first time, she did not shrink. She stood tall in the face of judgment, and Jack did not move from her side. Thunder cracked so loud it rattled the windows of the main house. The wind howled like wolves through the trees, tearing branches from trunks and sending them crashing against fences and sheds. Rain fell in sheets, horizontal and furious. The Thorn Ranch had seen storms before, but not like this. Jack paced the front room, jaw clenched. A section of roof over the east barn had already peeled off, sending debris flying across the yard. Somewhere, a chicken coop had splintered. Lightning flashed again, and through the window he spotted movement. His heart stopped. Across the muddy yard, Clara was running, barefoot, drenched, holding the hands of Elsie and Emmett as she led them toward the supply shed at the back of the property. The wind fought her with every step, whipping her shawl away, soaking her to the skin. One child stumbled. She scooped him up without pause. Jack flung open the door. Rain slammed into him like a wave. "Clara!" he shouted into the storm. But the wind stole his voice. She didn't hear him. She didn't stop. She shoved open the shed door, ushered the children inside, and slammed it shut behind them. He stood frozen at the doorway, soaked to the bone, staring across the chaos. His fists clenched, his breath caught in his throat. "She is the mother they needed," he whispered. Not the nursemaid, not even Ruth, Clara. Inside the shed, the air was damp and musty, but it was shelter. Clara crouched against the wall, wrapping her arms around both children, pressing their small bodies against hers. They were shivering, crying. "It's all right," she murmured. "Mama's here." The words escaped before she could stop them, and she didn't take them back. She rocked them gently, shielding their heads with her arms as wind rattled the walls. Her back ached, her knees stung against the cold floor, but she didn't let go. Not for anything. When the storm passed, the ranch was nearly unrecognizable. Sections of fencing lay twisted in the mud. A tree had fallen on the far hay barn. One of the horse stalls had collapsed. But there had been no injuries, no deaths, because people like Clara had not run. Jack found her still huddled in the shed, arms curled around the twins, eyes closed as they slept against her chest. Her clothes were soaked, her hair plastered to her cheeks, but she looked peaceful, fierce. He stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then he stepped inside. "Clara." Her eyes opened slowly. "They're all right," she whispered, not moving. "I know." He knelt beside her. "You could have stayed in the loft. You didn't have to risk yourself." "They needed someone," she said simply. His voice cracked. "So did I." He reached out and touched her shoulder gently, grounding himself in the reality of her, The weight, the warmth, the unwavering presence. "You're not staff anymore," he said, voice low. "You're not a helper. Or a worker." He looked into her eyes. "Your family." Clara's mouth opened slightly, but no words came, only tears. He pulled her into him, cradling all three, the woman and the children, against his chest as the wind finally died outside. The next day, the ranch hands gathered to assess the damage. They expected orders, updates, maybe blame. Instead, they found Jack Thorne standing outside the shed with Clara beside him, his arm around her shoulders, the twins peeking from behind her skirt. He didn't make an announcement. He didn't have to. The image said everything. And for the first time, those who had whispered behind her back looked her in the eye, not with suspicion, but with respect. The storm had barely dried from the earth when new thunder began to roll, this time in the form of whispers. Mara stood at the general store, arms folded, eyes sharp as broken glass. "Strange, isn't it?" she said loud enough for the others to hear, the way she clung to those children like they were her own. Harris leaned against the doorframe, chewing a toothpick. "Ain't natural. Woman walks in with nothing but a bag, and suddenly she's got herself a ranch, 2 heirs, and the boss's eye. She probably gave those twins away years ago. Now she's back to collect." "You really think they're hers?" Mara nodded slowly. "And Jack? He's too lost in grief to see it." By the end of the week, someone had painted a crude sign and hammered it into the dirt just outside Thorne Ranch. "Foster fraud," in red letters, underlined twice. It was the kind of thing no one claimed to make, but everyone saw. Clara found it first. She stood still, staring at the splintered wood, her breath caught in her chest, the words blurred, not from rain this time, but from the sting behind her eyes. She didn't speak. She turned around and went back to work. But inside, the walls she'd spent weeks rebuilding began to shake. Jack ripped the sign from the earth with one hand. With the other, he gripped the saddle horn so tight his knuckles turned white. He rode straight into town. That afternoon, a notice went up on the church doors and the saloon windows. "Meeting, Town Hall, 5 o'clock. Thorne will speak." By evening, nearly every rancher, shopkeeper, and hand had gathered under the rafters of the town hall. Murmurs buzzed like flies. Clara stood just inside the door, her back pressed to the wall. She held a small chalkboard in one hand, her palm damp with nerves. The twins sat quietly on a bench nearby. Jack stepped up to the front. "I hear some of you think I've been fooled," he began. "That I've been misled. That I let a woman into my home who doesn't belong." He scanned the crowd. Harris avoided his gaze. Mara held hers, but barely. "Well," Jack continued, "you're right about one thing. I let a woman into my home." He turned, gesturing toward Clara. "She didn't come with land deeds. She didn't ask for inheritance. She came with empty hands, and still gave more than any of us." He paused. "I watched her hold my children through nights I couldn't face. I saw her feed them when I had nothing left to give. She didn't ask to be their mother. She became it. Then, softly, not by blood, but by staying when she had every reason to leave." He stepped back. Clara moved forward slowly. She raised the chalkboard, where she had written in small, careful letters, "I do not want land. I want them. No one needed me, until they did." She lowered the board. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then an old woman near the back, Mrs. Anders, the widow who'd buried 3 sons in the war, cleared her throat. "She stayed through the storm," she said. "That's more than most." Others nodded. One by one, the room shifted. Mara backed toward the door. Harris slipped out beside her, silent now. No one stopped them. Jack took Clara's hand in front of them all. "She's not my housekeeper. She's the mother of my children." The town didn't cheer, but it stood still, and that was louder than applause. The night was still, too still. Clara stirred in the loft, a tightness in her chest waking her before the first cry. Something was wrong. The silence screamed. She rushed down the ladder barefoot, the barn floor cold beneath her feet. The crib where Elsie and Emmett usually slept when storms passed was empty. Her breath caught. A blanket lay crumpled. The back door stood slightly ajar. "No," she whispered. "No, no." She bolted toward the main house, heart thundering. Jack met her at the door, half-dressed, eyes already alert. She didn't need words. "They're gone," she gasped. "The children. Gone." The alarm bell rang seconds later, echoing across the ranch like a war cry. Men spilled from their bunks, boots slamming against wood. Lanterns flared. "Tracks lead north," one shouted. "2 sets of boots, small footprints too, fresh." Jack and Clara saddled up without hesitation. Clara gripped a lantern, her fingers trembling but steady enough. Jack holstered his revolver and took the lead. They rode hard into the trees, the path barely wide enough for horses. Wind whipped through branches. Somewhere in the dark, a coyote howled. Clara's flame wavered, casting long shadows between the trunks. She scanned every break in the leaves, every sound in the brush. Then, a faint cry. To the right, she yanked her horse's reins, veering off. Jack followed without question. They reached a clearing, an old hunting shed leaning crooked near the rocks. Clara jumped down first. Inside, huddled in the corner, were the twins, tear-streaked, gagged, terrified. Mara stood nearby, holding a lantern with one hand, a knife in the other. Beside her was a stranger, a man with a scarred jaw and a rifle. "Stay back!" he barked as Jack entered behind Clara. "You've gone mad," Jack growled. "It's not madness," Mara spat. "It's justice. She tricked you. You gave her everything that should have been mine. That land, those children, that place in your heart. They're not yours," Clara said, her voice low and firm. "She doesn't deserve it," Mara screamed. "She walks in from nowhere and now the town calls her mother? She's nothing." The man raised the rifle. Jack stepped forward slowly, gun drawn, steady. "I only need one good shot," he said coldly. The man hesitated. His hand twitched. Then he dropped the gun. "Wasn't paid enough for this," he muttered, and fled into the woods. Mara lunged for Clara, but Clara moved faster, grabbing a broken plank and blocking the blade. Jack tackled Mara to the ground, pinning her. "It's over," he said, "and so are you." Clara rushed to the twins, cutting their bindings, holding them tight as they wept against her neck. Footsteps pounded in the distance. The townspeople, hearing the bell and gunshot, arrived breathless, lanterns in hand. And they saw it all. Clara, kneeling in the dirt, arms wrapped around the children. Jack behind her, shielding them with his body, fury still in his eyes. Someone gasped. Another whispered, "Dear God." No one questioned anymore. No one doubted. A family had just fought through fire, through blood, through darkness, and no one would dare say they weren't one. The sun rose slowly over Thorn Ranch, casting gold across the fields, where shadows had once lingered. Since the night of the kidnapping, something had shifted, not just on the land, but in the people. Where once there had been suspicion, now there was warmth. Where once eyes narrowed, now they softened. Folks in town nodded when they passed Clara. Some even smiled. The ranch hands offered to help with chores she never asked for. Children waved at her when they saw her in town, and not a single word of doubt was spoken again. Then Jack made an announcement. It was simple, no fanfare, no elaborate invitation. "We're getting married," he told the hands one morning. He didn't say it out of obligation. He said it like a man who'd finally realized he had found his way home. The ceremony was held on the land, no chapel, just the open sky, the cottonwoods swaying gently, and rows of wooden chairs filled with neighbors, friends, and ranch hands who had once doubted her, now dressed in their Sunday best. Clara stepped out from the old storeroom where she'd once slept, now cleaned and adorned with lace and ribbon. She wore a plain cream dress, modest and soft, the fabric whispering with each step. Elsie and Emmett toddled ahead of her, holding small bunches of wildflowers in their tiny hands. Jack waited beneath the arbor, eyes misted, heart full. His voice caught the moment he saw her. The world seemed to still. When she reached him, he took both her hands in his. They spoke no grand vows, just the truth. "I lost myself after Ruth," Jack said quietly, voice trembling. "You didn't just save my children, Clara. You saved the part of me I thought was gone forever." Clara smiled, tears in her eyes. "I came here with nothing," she whispered, "and found everything." The preacher declared them husband and wife. Applause echoed against the hills. But it was the silence between the claps, the held breaths, the smiles behind wet eyes, that said the most. She wasn't just Clara anymore. She was Clara Thorne, and she was home. Later that afternoon, lanterns were strung across the yard. Tables of food lined the lawn, laughter spilled across the porch, and fiddles played softly in the background. At the center of it all stood Jack with a glass raised. He looked around at the crowd, those who had worked beside him, doubted him, stood against him, and now stood